Welcome everybody. I'm gonna just give everyone a few more seconds so more participants can stream in. This is a really exciting few weeks for all of us at the Social Justice Initiatives, at the Human Rights Institute, and anyone who cares about human rights or social justice at Columbia. When new students come in, it just brings in so much energy and inspiration for all of us. So we're just really excited to welcome you and congratulations again. I'm going to share my screen now, but if at any point you can't hear me or you can't see something, feel free to reach out and we can fix the tech. So as you enter the human rights community at Columbia, you're joining a community of advocates, of activists who are here now and ones who were here, well before you joined. And then we work with activists and advocates all over the world. We work with LGBT activists, with Indigenous activists, women's rights activists. And we thought we would just start with a quote from one of the many different trailblazers in the field of human rights. So why are we here? We're here because we all have a commitment beyond ourselves. We have a commitment to social change, to social justice. And the injustices that we see around the world take a range of different forms. So we see images of the wildfires all over the West Coast in the US caused by the climate crisis. We see ongoing and protracted conflict and war all over the world. We've seen how COVID has deepened and exacerbated all existing structural inequalities all over the world. This is an image of migrants walking for thousands of miles to get to safety. But it's not all gloom and doom. We see examples of inspiring, resilient, creative activists all over the world. These are, again, some words of guidance and wisdom from Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who talks about how real change, enduring change happens one step at a time. So despite challenges, despite periods of uncertainty, despite setbacks, it's important to persist and to just stay the course. She's also talked about the power and strength of collective change. And we've seen that, again, through examples all over the world. We've seen Black Lives Matter protesters taking to the streets despite COVID to advocate for pushing against systemic racial injustice in the US and around the world. We've seen protests erupt all over the world, despite closing space measures, despite the erosion of democracy and civil and political rights. And these are the exact step you take or the exact tool that you choose to use is less important than just your commitment to social change. And while you're at Columbia, you'll learn a whole range of different skills and tools, starting with litigation or advising clients or asylum seekers. These are immigration clinic students advising asylum seekers earlier this year. These are, again, alum who were investigating, conducting interviews, conducting focus group discussions in Papua New Guinea in response to sexual violence and environmental harms faced by a community there. This is also a former student conducting workshops and trainings for activists working on labor rights. And then this is one of our former students engaging in UN advocacy. So through clinics, through classes, you will be exposed to the range of human rights skills and tools which you'll use throughout your career. And one thing we wanted to remind you of is, of course, there's a lot that you learn in the classroom, and that's a big part of your experience while you're at Columbia. But one thing that's really important to us is not just what you learn in terms of technical skills, but but also that you have a community, that you have a group of people that you deepen relationships with during your time at Columbia, and that you work towards creating sustainable and joyful human rights movements together. So there are some things that we do to intentionally develop community. These are images of the 1L Advocates program on the left, and then of the LLM Human Rights Fellows on the right. And then in addition to the community that you will build at Columbia, you will deepen relationships with the partners and communities that you work with around the world. Again, these are examples of former students working alongside advocates and activists around the world. So we'll spend the next hour or so just going over how you can make the most of your time at Columbia. What are some of the skills that you will be able to develop as a student, and how we might be able to help. And while these few weeks are very exciting for all of us, I remember and recognize that these few weeks can be extremely overwhelming for incoming students. There's a lot of information that's thrown at your way, including at this session. So if there's one thing that you remember and take away from this, it's just that we're here to help. We're here to answer any questions that you might have all through your time at CLS and beyond.
Thank you, Gulika. Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah Cleveland. I am professor of human rights here at Columbia. I'm on sabbatical this semester, but I will be back teaching online and hopefully also in person next semester. And welcome to all of you who are new to Columbia, JDs as well as LLMs. Welcome to those of you who will be joining us next semester. We're really delighted to have you, and we're sorry not to be able to see you physically in the same space, but hopefully that will also come soon. For the reasons Gulika said, human rights and the practice of human rights and human rights advocacy has never been more important than now. We're seeing a convergence of many, many different types of crises around the world: environmental, pandemic, rise of illiberalism and authoritarianism, wars, etc. So we do our very best to help you prepare for that. I'm going to speak a little bit about course selection and how to think about classes for the year. And this is also a bit challenging to talk about right now, because right now we only have the course listings for this fall semester that have been posted, and we have 3 semesters that courses will be spread over. But I can assure you that Columbia always does its very best to provide a very rich exposure and experience to a range of human rights related courses, and that is true this year as well as others. As I said, I teach human rights, and in the spring semester I will be teaching the Human Rights Survey course together with Professor Amal Clooney. This is a class that has no prerequisites, and it can be considered an introduction to international law in general, but it also can be considered a specialized human rights course. I want to give you some ideas about how to think about the classes that you take this semester and the rest of the year and the rest of your time in law school. Major guidelines for how to think about classes. Now, others have told you take a mix of types of classes: lectures, seminars, write papers, exam classes, take clinics, externships, independent studies with professors, experience human rights and other kinds of law through journals and other student groups. I agree with all of that. I also strongly emphasize that you take professors, not subjects, within the human rights realm, broadly defined. Focus on people who are really excellent teachers who will inspire you and motivate you. Things that may not be obvious, however, are that there are a lot of subjects that are very, very directly relevant to human rights that don't have human rights in the title or even international law in the title. If you've never taken human rights and you want to do human rights work, I do urge you to take a core human rights course. I would also urge you to take a core public international law course, which I believe Professor Damrosch will be teaching in the spring. But beyond that, if there are subject areas that you are interested in, it's fantastic and important to get experience in those subjects, even as a matter of domestic law, not simply as a matter of international law. So if you're interested in children's rights or criminal law or family law or reproductive rights or LGBT rights or any topic that you're interested in, there's a direct international law and direct and domestic law analogy for those subjects. So if we don't have a course on the international law subject, take a course on the domestic law subject, build expertise in the law of your field, and you'll find when you venture into the international law aspects of it, that they raise exactly the same problems and they grapple with them in very, very similar ways. If you have regions of interest, take comparative law courses in those regions. If you have language ability, take a class and develop it. Those are all ways to build out a repertoire of skills and expertise that will help you in going into the human rights field. So just a quick overview of courses. In addition to my course, of course, the Human Rights Clinic taught by Professor Nookie is a core part of our human rights curriculum. As is the course taught this semester on human rights and the question of culture by Professor Kendall Thomas, transitional justice by Graham Simpson. We offer courses on the jurisprudence of war and international humanitarian law. Law of the WTO, international trade law, is a very important subject for a lot of work in the area of the intersection of trade and human rights. We're offering courses on immigration, refugee, and citizenship law, as well as the Immigration Law Clinic. We have this semester a comparative and international law workshop. For the domestic law analogs, of course, we have Professor Harcourt and Hoag's course on abolition of the death penalty, mental health law, Native American law, criminal law courses. All of our clinics are human rights clinics, regardless whether they specifically focus on international tools. Most of our externships are also international law or international human rights courses. So be creative and think broadly about what type of your work you're interested in going into, and then pursue subjects in those areas. And of course, I and the other HRI staff and faculty here are always happy to help advise you further by email, Zoom, or otherwise. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the new academic year. I'm Sarah Nucky. I'm the director of the Human Rights Clinic at Columbia Law School, and with Professor Cleveland, I'm the faculty co-director of the Human Rights Institute. I'm going to talk a little bit about ways to develop your skills as a human rights advocate while you're at Columbia Law School, whether for 3 years as a JD or your year as an LLM. So in addition to learning the law, the history, the theory, the critiques, the philosophy of the law through your classes, it's essential to learn skills of advocacy. What do we do with our knowledge of the law? How do we use the law? How do we change the law? These skills are a range of different types of practical knowledges, like how do we work well in teams? How do we work well transnationally across language, across culture? How to do good legal or policy or factual research? How to interview clients or survivors of human rights abuses? How to write research memos or persuasive briefs to a court? How to do oral advocacy, how to do effective lobbying to a government or a UN official. These are all skills that to be an effective, to be a strategic human rights advocate, you'll need to learn. And they're all things that you can learn through a range of different opportunities that the law school provides. One significant one, as Professor Cleveland mentioned, is clinics, where you'll do a mixture of theoretical and reflective learning through seminars, as well as working on real cases with real partners and real clients, but under supervision of your professor. And there's a wide range to choose from there, some focusing broadly on human rights or specifically, for example, on immigration and asylum seekers, or learning the skills of mediation. Then there's also a range of externships where you can work
for the government, for example, or for NGOs or for the United Nations. I'd also encourage you to take up internships, whether for pro bono hours or for credit, where you're working inside an NGO for the semester or for the year. You can also do pro bono work with us at the Human Rights Institute. We have active advocacy work all around the world, and we love working with students and invite you to apply to work with us on any of our projects. You can do similar work with the amazing projects that the students groups like SPIN or like RightsLink set up for students to work with each other and NGOs or governments around the world. You also could be a research assistant for a professor on some of their advocacy work. MOOCs are also a fantastic way to learn really excellent research, persuasive writing, and oral advocacy skills. And then finally, summer fellowships, which we'll hear a bit more about from SJI later today. So these are skills that you really need to learn to be an effective advocate, and that alongside classes of learning the law, you can learn at law school and through extracurricular activities. They're also really important for employers to see. Especially in human rights work, employers really want to see that you've built up expertise and built up areas of specialization and interest through your time at law school. I look forward to meeting some of you in person, hopefully in the law school. I'm teaching hybrid, so I am in person, and for others to meeting you via Zoom calls over the year.
Great. Thank you, Sarah. I just wanted to jump in and introduce who you're all seeing on your screen before we turn to some real life examples of how people have navigated life at CLS as students and continued on to work here from colleagues Gulika Reedy and Priyanka Motaparty. But I wanted to say hello also. I'm Joanne Camiff-Ward, and I lead our Human Rights in the US project, working on a range of economic and social rights and racial and gender justice in the United States. And just introduce the other folks from HRI and SJI and RightsLink very quickly. So I will start, sorry, putting you all on the spot a little bit. Anjali, do you want to go ahead and just say your name and your project?
Hi, I'm Anjali. I'm the Associate Director on the project on war crimes and mass graves.
Thank you. Sarah Mehta.
Hi, I'm Sarah Mehta. I run the Trial Watch project at Columbia, which monitors criminal trials around the world.
Tony.
I'm Tony Wilson. I'm the director of the Security Force Monitor project that works to make police and military forces around the world more transparent and accountable through open source research.
Anna, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Anna MacDonald. I'm a human rights practitioner in residence, and I'm writing a book about how international law and treaties are developed at the UN.
Sarah Al-Shwish.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah Al-Shwish. I'm program assistant at HRI.
And Dominique.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dominique Gallo, and I'm also a program assistant in HRI.
And Jessica, you have spoken, but not everyone knows who you are. So maybe you will hear a lot from Jessica in the course of this semester.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jessica Pearson. I'm the Interim Director of Programs for the Human Rights Institute and the Program Administrator for the Human Rights Clinic. Thank you all for joining today.
And shortly you'll hear from Cassandra Thiano from Social Justice Initiatives, and she'll introduce herself then, as well as Rauda Fawaz from RightsLink. But now I wanted to turn it over to my colleagues. Gulika, are you starting? Is that okay? Gulika.
Sorry, I'm going to take over for Gulika, Joanne.
Oh, okay. So Gulika, why don't you introduce yourself then?
I'm Gulika Reddy. I'm the clinical teaching fellow for the Human Rights Clinic and lead a project on human rights and peace building in Kashmir.
Sorry, Anjali, over to you and then to Priyanka.
Thanks, Joanne, and welcome to CLS. We're so excited to have you here as part of the human rights community. I'm so sad that we can't be doing this in person, but nonetheless, we're sure that your either 1 year or 3 years here at Columbia will be really fantastic and invaluable. As I said, my name is Anjali and I'm a CLS alum. I graduated from the JD program in 2017, and I'd like to talk a little bit about what I did while I was at Columbia Law School and how the various classes, MOOC courts, journals, student groups have informed both the trajectory of my career and what I think about in terms of next steps for human rights. So as I had spent a little bit of time before coming to Columbia Law School, mostly in the humanitarian space, and knew that I wanted to do something related to international law, but didn't have a very clear sense of quite what that was. I'm from Kenya, and so growing up in kind of the East Africa region, had grown up seeing conflicts in the neighboring countries and also, of course, in Kenya as well. And so in my first year, I was advised, I think correctly, to really focus on building some core skills and then focusing on my 1L classes, as well as prioritizing the development of community. So I got involved with the Law in Africa Student Society and really found a strong network of people who were from the continent who I could rely upon, who had outlines, who could assist me with classes, and really think about building a strong core of mentors from the student body. And so I would really recommend you get involved with student groups of some form based on your interest. I also participated in the European Law MOOC Court, not because I necessarily had a very deep interest in European law, but mostly because I really wanted to develop my public speaking skills and learn about a specific area of the law that I may not otherwise prioritize. And so I participated on a team of 4 in the European Law MOOC Court, and we went to Germany to argue our case, and it was really a fantastic experience. My second and third year, I mostly focused on taking a mixture of human rights courses and participating in the Human Rights Clinic. I worked on a project in the Central African Republic, which I now direct, and it was focused at the time on helping civil society and doing investigations on war crimes. And within our first year, we got involved and we traveled to the Central African Republic, and a group of students together with Professor Serenaki and partners from Argentina assisted in the investigation of a massive war crimes case. And so this was the first forensic investigation in the Central African Republic of a complex mass murder case, as well as the first investigation of peacekeepers for war crimes ever. And as students, we were immediately thrown into and worked on this really important international criminal law case. And I think for me, what it really crystallized was the role of law school in shaping how I think about what international criminal law practice looks like, what human rights practice looks like, and how to prioritize rights holders. It also, quite frankly, taught me how international criminal law works in practice. I had expected my law school trajectory to be a lot about academia and thinking through big ideas and theories, and I really realized kind of from an early point that there was so much deep skill building that I was getting. And I was learning about how to interview, I was learning how to work with partners, I was learning how to develop some of the core skills that I now use every day. I also, alongside that, took the Black Letter Law classes on international law and human rights. I strongly second what Professor Cleveland says on professors over subjects. I think what my time at Columbia taught me was that these networks, the relationships, the mentorship really stays with you as you go along, and both Professor Naki and Professor Cleveland are among my biggest mentors today. And I think try to use either your 1 year or 3 years to really build those strong, deep relationships. I took the transitional justice class with Professor Simpson, and he's still one of my strongest mentors. And then finally, in my third year, I got involved with journals and had the opportunity to be able to write a note for one of the journals as well as edit one of the journals. And that really taught me about how we can think about scholarship, human rights scholarship, international law scholarship more, how to work closely with professors who are thinking about innovating in the field, and also how to do really deep writing. It can be quite hard, I think, once you leave law school to engage in a very deep writing piece and have it published. And so so this allowed me, while at law school, to publish a note and have my name out on an issue area that I was particularly passionate about. I think finally 1 year or 3 years can feel like a lot at the moment, especially when you're at the beginning, but it goes by really quickly. And so the one thing I would say to really prioritize while you're here is developing strong friendships and building yourself a community. People really mean it when they say they're here for you, that they have your back, that they're here to support you. Don't be afraid to go to office hours. Don't be afraid to try new things, to have new projects. In my second year, there was not an international humanitarian law moot court, and some friends and I wanted to create it, and we went to our professors and asked them, would you fund this? And they said, of course. And so people here are really looking out for you if you're able to take some initiative and to develop strong friendships. Whatever it is that you want to do, whether we have the course or not, whether we have the expertise or not, we will find a way to make it happen. I think I'll stop there and turn it over to Priyanka, but happy to answer any questions. And of course, happy to meet with you and speak with you over Zoom or otherwise.
Thank you, Anjali. So my name is Priyanka Motoparthi, and I am a 2009 CLS graduate. So 11 years has passed since I left the doors as a student, and 1 year has passed since I came back to join the Human Rights Institute as the director of the project on armed conflict, counterterrorism, and human rights. I'll start by saying a little bit about what I did since leaving Columbia, and then address how my time at Columbia shaped what I've done in my career. After graduating from CLS, I received the Leonard Sandler Fellowship to work at Human Rights Watch for 1 year and do a fellowship where I was paid and I received a kind of training in how to do human rights documentation, research, investigations, and advocacy. During that time, I worked on a project on migrant domestic workers in Kuwait and traveled several times to Kuwait. After my year-long fellowship was over, I stayed with Human Rights Watch, first with the Middle East Division. Then I spent 3 years living in Cairo, working as the Children's Rights Division's Middle East researcher. After that, I spent about 1.5 years doing freelance consultancies, including a consultancy for Human Rights Watch on Syria, looking at accountability for the Caesar torture victims, the victims of torture who died in custody, in Syrian government custody, and appeared in a set of smuggled photographs that were later released by a Syrian defector. And finally, I spent several years working for the Human Rights Watch Emergencies team, which does investigations in conflict and crisis situations around the world. I did work in South Sudan and Bangladesh on the Rohingya crisis, in Yemen, in Syria, and in Iraq, amongst other places. And about 1 year ago, I came back to CLS to join the Human Rights Institute because I was really interested in pursuing more of an advocacy-focused and long-term strategic role. So let me just back up and say a few words, where I know we're short on time, but a few words about how my time at Columbia really shaped my career. Columbia for me was really a place where I came knowing I wanted to do international human rights work, but not knowing what that work should be. It's an incredible environment in which to get to know yourself better, to explore a range of different interests through, as other people have said, through events, through exposure to practitioners who come to the Human Rights Clinic as guest speakers, or who come to lunchtime events and you can connect with and ask questions of. I also, was able to meet practitioners in the human rights field by joining student groups. I was a member of the Middle East Law Students group, which was called Qanun at the time. And I used that as a way to just reach out to advocates who were in New York or passing through, whose careers I found inspiring or informative, and to invite them to come and address the student body. So there are just, as Anjali's already highlighted, there's so many ways that you can use Columbia as a resource and a platform to have access to the types of experiences or the types of individuals who you would like to learn more about the type of work that they're doing. One part of Columbia that was incredibly formative in helping me understand better what type of work I might like to do were the summer experiences. Through SJI, I was able to get funding to do 2 summers worth of public interest work. I spent my first summer near Haifa in Israel working for a Palestinian human rights organization. And I spent my second summer in Cairo interning for a Human Rights Watch researcher. So those experiences really helped me not only better understand the different types of work that I was able to do, but also prove to employers that I was able and willing to do work abroad and that I had gained that type of experience. I think I'll stop there, but I am happy to answer any types of questions that people have, and just want to stress, as Anjali has as well, how much the community I met at CLS, the different people who passed through the institution, and the experiences I was able to seek out really formed my decisions in shaping my career.
Hello, everyone. I am Cassandra. I serve as the Assistant Director for Human Rights and Public International Law in the Office of Social Justice Initiatives. I also co-teach one of the Human Rights Public International Law offerings here, the UN externship program. Prior to Columbia, I was an international human rights attorney. Well, I'm still an international human rights attorney, but I worked at the Open Society Foundations in the Justice Initiative, where I litigated cases dealing with citizenship and statelessness. I also have a background in women's rights and immigration policy and advocacy. So let me tell you a little bit more about the Office of Social Justice Initiatives. We exist to inspire and prepare students and graduates to use their legal education to advance the public good and promote social justice through the law. So how do we do that? We are your public interest career advising office. So we advise on any careers dealing with public interest, government, or human rights. But we do a lot more than that. We also run a number of programs, of which one of them is a Public Interest Public Scholars Fellowship, where we seek to create a dedicated community for students who are absolutely sure that they want to do work either in public interest, government, or human rights. I run the Human Rights Internship Program, which is specifically for students who want to do human rights work abroad. So of course you can do human rights work in the US, but if you want to do human rights work abroad, and all of this of course is, pending what's happening with COVID, everything in the world. But generally the program works in that you will apply to be part of the program. And once admitted, we offer a generous stipend. We pay for your travel round trip to the place where your host organization is. And we also reimburse for your visa and your vaccination fees. And in addition to that, because as a 1L, you will not have had the chance yet to take some core human rights or public international law classes, we offer a primer. And many of the presenters here are actually instructors in that mini course that we offer to really prepare you so that when you get to your organization, everything is not completely new to you. And in addition to the Human Rights Internship Program, we also advise on a number of postgraduate fellowships. So not only do we advise you the whole time that you're at Columbia, you can also come back to us after you've graduated for the length of your career and continue advising with us. And some of the postgraduate fellowships that we offer, Priyanka just mentioned one of them, the Sandler Fellowship. They're really opportunities to launch your career in human rights. You probably have heard that human rights is one of those places where it's really difficult to get your foot in. So by offering these postgraduate fellowships, we really enable you to start your career and do something that is exciting, passionate to you, and that can open further doors along the way. We also are happy to do curriculum advisement. We will happily connect you with alumni, and we used to do a number of dinners, informal dinners with alumni in the various different practice areas that might be of interest to you. We may do a virtual format this year. It's not exactly clear, but we're hoping to keep a lot of the programming that we used to do, but just to do it creatively and virtually. So more on that later. You can check the SJI newsletter for all of our activities. And one thing that I do want to plug is that we also host a number of panels. One of the series is called SGI Mondays. So this year, our SGI Mondays will be specifically focused on 3 topics: elections, COVID, and racial justice. So we'll be bringing through 5 Mondays this semester, various speakers to talk about their careers, how they got started, what they're doing, and they will be on sort of the 3 hot topics of the day. So I think I will close there, but please feel free to reach out to me with further questions. For everyone else, we start advising you starting October 1st. You can make appointments in Simplicity to meet with us. And for 2Ls and 3Ls and LLMs, you are able to meet with us right now. All right, thank you.
Hi, everybody. My name is Raoul. I'm a 2L, and I'm one of the presidents of RightsLink, which is the student organization for human rights on campus. We do a lot of things, but specifically we focus on events and programming for students who are interested in learning more about the various subjects and topics there are in the human rights field. And also providing research opportunities with human rights organizations, both domestically and abroad. So look out for our emails. We're having our first event actually on September 23rd during the lunch hour, so starting at 12:45, and you'll be hearing a little bit from Joanne then as well. Yeah, and I really encourage you guys to join. We're really trying to continue creating a human rights community here at CLS, even with under the current circumstances. We'll be having a lot of small group reading groups and discussions, and hopefully through that you guys will get to know each other. Other organizations on campus that I really encourage you to check out if you're interested in human rights is the Society for Immigrant and Refugee Rights, IRAP, the International Refugee Assistance Project, obviously SPIN, which has been mentioned a couple of times, and the Columbia Society for International Law. These are all organizations that work together pretty often, and really we're trying to create a community for everybody. I know when I first came into Columbia, I was kind of looking for where the human rights people are, and I found them in these organizations. I'm also an editor on the Human Rights Law Review and Jailhouse Lawyers Manual, and you'll learn more about journals, later, but it's definitely a really great way, like Anjali mentioned earlier, to get more academically involved in topics that interest you. So for example, I'll be writing my note kind of at the intersection of environmental law and international human rights on the impact and rights of trash collectors in Egypt, which I'm really excited about. Yeah, there's also a number of ways that you can get involved with human rights at CLS more institutionally. There's the Student Consortium Diversity Working Group, which is working to improve the experience that students have in the human rights and public interest fields. And you'll definitely see an email soon about getting involved with that, being a representative on it. And it's a great way to have your voice heard and what you think regarding what you think human rights students at Columbia need, because I can definitely say that everyone on this call and everyone working in the human rights field at Columbia is always trying to improve your experience, and they're really invested in hearing all of your voices. I also really encourage you guys to check out the different moot courts. Again, this was mentioned earlier. I actually also did the European Union Law Moot Court. And although unfortunately because of COVID, we did not get to go to Europe, it was still really, really fun. I also don't particularly have an interest in European Union law, but it was really cool to learn about it. And also the topics are often quite related to the human rights field. Our topic this past year was actually on like minority religious rights and slaughter rights. And so you'll get to see the ways in which various international law can cover these issues. And yeah, and I think it's a really great way to also improve advocacy skills and make some friends and find a topic that's interesting. I know that when I first came in as a 1L, although I've enjoyed 1L, I will say there were a lot of moments where I felt very bogged down in 1L requirements. And so getting involved with all of these different organizations, with research, with pro bono, whatever you have time for, is a really great way to kind of keep your head straight and remember like why you're at law school and what you're actually passionate about. Because I think that in 1L that can, sometimes it's easy to start to lose it a little bit. And so for me, I came to Columbia because I want to do international human rights, and getting involved with these organizations really kind of kept me on track to do that. Yeah, and I'm happy to talk to anybody who has any questions about any of this. There's a lot to talk about, and I don't think it can all be covered in one session, but please reach out. Not just me, but 2Ls and 3Ls in general in the field are really, really excited to talk to you guys. We're always trying to get students interested in this type of work, and you should not hesitate to reach out.
Thank you so much, Rauda. So now we can turn it over to question and answer. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A function. I also, before we get to that, just wanted to flag that HRI has several public-facing events throughout the year. We are launching a series on women's human rights, and our next event is October 9th at 12:20, and that will feature art as a tool for activism. We will have speakers presenting art from the Wallet Gallery here at Columbia and Lehigh University Art Gallery with the theme of doing democracy. I also wanted to point out that we have a virtual happy hour next Monday. Maybe I can share the screen with you. So this is our event next Monday from 4:40 to 5:30, where you can come and ask questions and mingle in small groups. Everyone you see on the screen today will be there. And if you have a smartphone, you can scan that QR code and register right now. I'll also put the link to register in the chat. And we'll be sending around the recording of this event, the link to register for next Monday, as well as some more student resources about how to get involved with human rights at CLS, including our student guide and HRI's brochure, which I'll also put links to in the chat. So we can move on to questions now. I see one question, which maybe one of the Human Rights Clinic supervisors could answer, is that what if COVID continues, what will replace the international work where students would typically travel for this work?
I could maybe take a first stab, and if not, then I can pass it over to Sarah and maybe also Cassandra for ATRIP. I think this is a question that all of the human rights organizations are grappling with around the world at the same time. Just to speak for some of the forensics work that I do with partner organizations around the world, we had travel planned for May, which we then pushed to June, which we've then pushed to July, and now has been pushed to November. And we're finding other ways to adapt, to think about how we can do the work remotely. And I think really often in a pandemic, it can seem very, very bleak. And this weekend, I definitely felt that things were very bleak in this country at certain moments, but there's also great opportunity. We've seen how the kind of need to automatically shift and to be able to go online and to be able to continue to do urgent, crucial work every single day, even though we can't travel, has led to enormous democratization. And so we now have, the Security Council operating remotely. We have the UN in Geneva operating remotely. And that means that people who are not in the same location can suddenly be able to attend these events and participate. So we did a series on COVID, and we had colleagues from Somalia Zoom in. And this was something that just wasn't possible prior to the pandemic. So I think, at least from the perspective of some of those who do work with human rights organizations, it will be to continue to innovate and think creatively about how to do this work remotely. For a lot of the projects that we do, this was already remote because of issues relating to security or access to to a region. And so it just allows us the chance to think about what are the alternate modes to be able to carry out human rights advocacy, as opposed to actually thinking, you know, just thinking that we won't be able to do the work. It's instead reframing and shifting the work.
Thank you, Anjali. And I see two questions regarding human rights research assistantships this semester. Will we be announcing them? When we will be announcing them? And can January LLMs be able to apply for them before officially joining in January?
Jessica, before we go to that question, can I quickly answer the question as well, the prior question?
Oh, absolutely, please.
You. So for the Human Rights Internship Program, when we realized that none of our students could really travel to their, the host organizations, we were able to arrange with most of the organizations to do a virtual internship. And you know, depending on the time zone, the time frame, that worked out for some students, and for others it would be too difficult of a 10-12 hour time difference. But for the most part, our students were still able to partake in their internships virtually, and for many of them, they reported having a really great experience. So we managed to make do with what we had. It remains to be seen whether they will be able to travel this summer or not, but if they are able to travel, we will facilitate that.
Thank you.
Thanks. And I'll just jump in on the RA question. I think we will be sending out research assistant calls for some of our projects in probably the next 2 weeks or so. They have a variety of different requirements. So I don't have a solid answer on the question about whether LLMs can sign up before officially joining CLS. It might depend on the type of internship and the hours, and if it's for credit or otherwise. So keep on the lookout for us, and that will come from HRI in general. And just echoing the point that was made earlier about classes, there's lots of professors who are hiring RAs and doing work that touch and concern both foreign and comparative law. So it's certainly, I think we do a lot of that work, but we don't do it all. So your inboxes are likely flooded since you started school, but seek out professors who are working in substantive areas and regions where you have interest, and they might have options as well.
I also do want to point out that everyone should be receiving an email like almost every week from just about different pro bono opportunities, both at Columbia and externally. And a lot of them actually do have to do with human rights, both domestically and internationally. I think the shift to remote work has actually allowed organizations to kind of outsource a lot of the work that they need, and open a few more doors for students to be able to get involved with it.
I don't see any more answers in our Q&A. So if we have no more questions, I think we can wrap up for the day. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. And again, we'll be following up with more resources, the link to register for our event next Monday, and the recording of this event as well. So thank you all so much for joining us. Have a great semester.